Have you ever wondered what secrets the desert holds when the sun is high and mercy runs thin? Imagine a black Mustang, once a champion, now buried beneath crimson sands, not by fate, but by a human heart gone astray. But even in the harshest places, hope can bloom where no one expects, sometimes in the hands of a stranger or the courage of a child. Before we step into this journey of heartbreak, courage, and second chances, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts with our family of storytellers. And may your day be filled with kindness, hope, and the courage to stand up for what's right, because sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change everything. The day broke with the sharp, dry clarity only New Mexico could conjure. A painted sky of blue and gold above Willow Creek, a town so small it barely warranted a sign on the highway. Here, every boot print told a story, and every secret, though rare, would drift across the mesas sooner or later. Already the first hints of desert heat shimmered above the red dirt roads. In the distance, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains loomed like silent judges over a land built on sweat, pride, and memory. At the heart of it all stood Jasper Harlan, owner of the 10,000-acre Harlan Ranch. Jasper, 44, stood tall and angular, a lean, hard man shaped by the land and by a father who believed kindness was a weakness. His short black hair, streaked early with silver, framed a jaw set so tightly it seemed chiseled from rock. Steel gray eyes took the measure of everything and everyone. Today he wore a pale button-down shirt, well-worn jeans, and scuffed cowboy boots. No frills, just purpose. This was the day of the annual Independence Day race, the high point of Jasper's calendar, a day when every rancher, laborer, and drifter for miles around came to watch men and horses test their mettle. The Harlan Ranch buzzed with anticipation. Spectators in faded hats and worn boots crowded the fences. Stable hands moved briskly, horses shifted in their stalls, and banners flapped in the dusty wind. But none drew more attention than Jasper and his Mustang, Midnight. Midnight, an American Mustang stallion, was 4 years old, a living shadow, smaller than most stallions, but with muscle coiled under a coat so black it seemed to drink the sunlight. Only a single white star broke the darkness at his brow. Midnight's eyes were deep and wary, the kind of eyes that watched, weighed, and rarely trusted. Jasper had paid dearly at auction for this horse, seeing in him both a challenge and a legacy, something to dominate, perfect, and parade before his rivals. Beside the paddock, Clem Walker, the ranch's 67-year-old head wrangler, watched with a bittersweet gaze. Clem was short, stooped, his sun-browned skin mapped with wrinkles, blue eyes sharp under the brim of a battered Stetson. Decades spent with horses and hardship had given him a patience that ran bone deep, and a heart that bruised easily for any living creature. Midnight was his favorite, though he'd never admit it. There was something in the stallion's stubborn fire that reminded Clem of himself as a younger man. As the morning heat sharpened, Jasper mounted Midnight for the big race. He cut a figure as hard as the land tall in the saddle, spine straight, hands steady but tense on the reins. Midnight's powerful legs bunched and released with every stride, hooves thundering over the red track as the crowd roared. They were favorites to win, but as they rounded the far bend, Midnight stumbled, a tiny hitch in his left foreleg that only a horseman would notice. He recovered, but the moment's falter was enough. They finished third. For most, it would have been a triumph. For Jasper, it was humiliation. He jerked the reins, his jaw clenched, ignoring the sympathetic looks of those who knew how much this race meant to him. By noon, the crowd was fading, the smell of grilled meat and laughter drifting off down Main Street. Jasper led Midnight back to the stables, every step marked by simmering fury. The Mustang's gait was off slightly, favoring the injured leg. Inside the cool, dusty barn, Clem waited, watching Midnight move. "He's favoring that leg," Clem said, his voice low but steady. "Could be a sprain. He needs rest, Jasper. Let me call Doc Evans for a look." Jasper didn't bother hiding his anger. "I don't need your excuses, Clem. That horse cost me everything today." Clem stood his ground, hands gnarled but gentle as he reached for Midnight's bridle. "He's just a horse, Jasper. He gave you everything he had." Jasper's face darkened further. He leaned in, voice hard as flint. "Get him out of my sight. Take him to the far arroyo. I don't want to see that animal limp around my barn. If he's not running by next week, he's gone. And Clem, don't make me repeat myself." Clem's heart sank. He knew Jasper's pride and his anger. Yet in all his years, he'd never seen Jasper's coldness so thoroughly turned on an animal. As Clem led Midnight out to the old truck, Maria, the youngest stable hand, about 23, small and quick, with dark hair and worried brown eyes, watched anxiously from the shadows. She often helped Clem and cared for the horses with an instinctive kindness. Today, her hands shook as she brushed the dust from Midnight's coat. "He's scared, Clem," she whispered, voice trembling. Clem nodded, unable to answer, fighting the knot of dread in his gut. Jasper, consumed by wounded pride, followed the group as they crossed the ranch's boundary toward the far arroyo, a dry, sun-blasted gash in the land where only rattlesnakes and scrub survived. When they reached the edge, Jasper's face was blank, eyes cold as stone. "You know what to do," he said, voice clipped and merciless. "Dig a hole, deep enough so he can't get out. Bury the horse up to his neck, leave his head out so he can watch the sky. Let him remember what failure feels like. If anyone talks, you're gone by sundown." The words fell like hammer blows. Maria gasped, tears brimming in her eyes. The two youngest stable hands boys of 17, afraid and unsure, looked to Clem. Clem's voice quavered as he pleaded, "Jasper, for the love of God, he's hurt. Let me at least call the vet." But Jasper only glared. "You heard me. Do it. Or join him." With horror and shame, Clem and the others did as they were told. Midnight fought, nostrils flaring in terror, but Clem tried to soothe him, voice breaking. They dug the hole, eased the Mustang in, packed the sand around him until only his proud, frightened head remained above the earth. When it was done, Jasper turned without another word, leaving them in the silence of the setting sun. As darkness crept across the land, Clem and Maria lingered, whispering comfort until fear for their own futures forced them away. Midnight, alone beneath the vast New Mexico sky, watched as the light faded. He was wounded, but his spirit was not yet broken. A few miles south, in a weather-beaten farmhouse, 12-year-old Cody Lane pedaled his old, rusted bike across a dirt path toward the open fields. Cody was all elbows and knees, sun-bleached, sandy hair flopping over bright green eyes, his shirt and jeans a size too big, and patched in more than one place. Home was hard these days. His father, Ben Tall, rough-handed, once a proud wrangler, had lost his job at Harlan Ranch when Jasper replaced most of the staff with machines. Ruth, his mother, slim and practical, worked wonders stretching every dollar. This morning, Cody noticed Scout, their blue heeler, had slipped out early nose to the wind as if on a mission. Cody called, but the dog had a mind of his own. When Cody reached the fence line, he spotted Scout pawing frantically at the ground. In the soft dirt were fresh hoofprints Mustang, by the look of them, and recent. Cody's heart thumped with excitement and unease, not knowing that before the next dawn these tracks would lead him to a desperate rescue and a choice that would change everything. Back in the arroyo, Midnight waited alone, half-buried, defiant. The sky above him darkened. Far off, hope began to stir, and the fate of all their lives was set on a collision course with the darkness of one man's heart. Midnight's world was sound and sand and the ache of fear. The sun had crossed half the sky, pressing heat into his flared nostrils. Each time the wind shifted, dust coated his lashes and tongue. The Mustang's black coat shimmered where the sun struck his exposed head and neck, but the rest of him was locked in the cool, suffocating earth. Hours passed. How many, he could not know. Insects swarmed and retreated, shadows slid across the dunes, and every muscle in his neck ached from the struggle to stay upright. Out of sight, Clem Walker had returned to the ranch, moving with a heaviness that left his boots dragging in the dirt. Maria trailed behind, her face blotched with dust and tears. At the barn, the two youngest stable hands, Eddie, a nervous boy with a scar on his left cheek, and Lucas, a lanky youth with freckled arms, stood silent, haunted by what they'd done. Eddie's hands trembled as he tried to rub the sand from his jeans. Lucas refused to meet anyone's eyes. Maria, wiping her face, turned to Clem. "We have to tell someone, Clem. Midnight will die out there." Her voice, usually soft, was raw with desperation. Clem's gaze was distant, fixed on the shimmering horizon beyond the paddock. "You think Jasper won't know it was us? He'll fire everyone, maybe worse. He's not the boy I once knew." Clem's shoulders slumped as he reached for a pitchfork, but his hands hung limp. "We wait for night. Maybe then we can go." Meanwhile, Jasper Harlan sat alone in his office, a Spartan room above the main house, its walls decorated with old rodeo photographs and yellowed news clippings of Harlan Ranch victories. Jasper's face, sharp in the fading sunlight, reflected nothing but fatigue and an icy resolve. He nursed a glass of whiskey, eyes on a photo of his father Marcus Harlan, broad and unyielding, the patriarch whose shadow Jasper could never quite outrun. Jasper's jaw worked as he thought about the morning's humiliation. Midnight had been the promise he staked his pride on. Now the horse's failure burned in him like a fever, and the memory of his father's sneer echoed in his head. He barely registered the approach of his housekeeper, Mrs. Doyle, a woman in her late 50s with a plump, pleasant face and sharp hazel eyes. She'd managed the household since Jasper was a boy, once a surrogate mother, now reduced to quick steps and nervous glances. "There's a call for you, sir," she said, her voice steady. "It's from the bank." Jasper waved her away without looking up. "Tell them I'll call back. Not now." As dusk fell, far across the scrub, Cody Lane crouched at the fence line, Scout beside him. The blue heeler's coat was streaked with dust, his tongue lolling, but his nose was busy at the hoof prints that disappeared into the deeper sand. Cody was anxious. The tracks were too fresh, the prints too deep to be just a wild Mustang passing through. He thought of the stories Dad used to tell about horses trapped in flash floods, about animals caught by poachers, his own heart hammering. He'd already been gone longer than he'd meant, but the growing sense of dread drove him forward. Back at the Lane farmhouse, Ruth Lane was at the kitchen window, anxiety furrowing her brow as the last light faded. She was slicing onions for dinner, the room filled with the rich scent of simmering beans. Ben Lane entered, wiping sweat and engine grease from his hands. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face hardened by sun and loss, Ben's eyes softened as he saw Ruth's worry. "He'll be back, hun. Scout's with him." "He's just a boy, Ben," Ruth whispered. "That's all he is." Ben wrapped his arms around her for a moment. "He's Lane tough, and if he isn't back soon, I'll go out myself." Cody moved carefully, slipping between mesquite bushes and patches of prickly pear, Scout darting ahead, ears pricked. At the edge of the arroyo, the dog halted and barked a sharp, urgent note that sent a chill up Cody's spine. There, half submerged in the sand, was the head of a black horse. The animal's eyes rolled white, nostrils flaring, the velvet skin flecked with sweat and dirt. Cody's heart dropped into his boots. "Oh God, oh God," he breathed. Midnight's breath was shallow and rapid, his mouth coated in foam and dust. Cody slid down the bank, keeping his hands visible, his voice gentle. "Easy, big fella. I'm here. I'm gonna help you." Scout circled, barking in distress, as if trying to rouse the world to the cruelty unfolding. Cody's mind raced. He ran back up the slope, searching for his canteen, already nearly empty. He poured the last drops into his hand and held it to the horse's lips. Midnight lapped desperately. "Hang on," Cody murmured, glancing up at the darkening sky. "I'll get help, I promise." He sprinted home as the first stars pricked through the twilight. Scout stayed at the arroyo, unwilling to leave the wounded horse. At home, Cody burst through the kitchen door, breathless, his face streaked with sweat and fear. "Mom, Dad, there's a horse. He's trapped. Somebody buried him alive out by the arroyo. We have to help." Ben didn't hesitate. Grabbing his boots and a lantern, he barked orders. "Get the shovel, Ruth, blankets, rope, whatever you can carry. Cody, show me." The urgency in Ben's voice galvanized the family into action. Ruth's hands shook as she packed water and first aid supplies. Meanwhile, Clem and Maria waited for Jasper's truck to disappear down the lane. They moved with silent purpose, meeting at the back fence. "We can't leave him there," Maria whispered, her voice steady now. Clem nodded. "Grab what you can, shovels, water, anything for a splint. We'll go around the south side. Jasper won't see us." As they hurried into the twilight, Maria's brother, Tomas A., slim, sharp-faced man of 20 with a quiet, resolute manner, fell in beside them. He worked odd jobs around the ranch and shared Maria's devotion to the horses. "I heard what happened," he said simply. "I'll help." The Lane family's old pickup rattled down the rutted road, Cody's directions urgent. They reached the arroyo just as the moon climbed above the desert. Scout barked madly as they approached. "Over here!" Cody called, waving his flashlight. The sight shocked Ruth into tears and Ben into action. Ben and Clem's group arrived almost simultaneously, startled to find each other at the edge of the sand pit. In the moonlight, lines of worry vanished. Only the shared purpose of rescue remained. "We dig together," Clem said quietly. "But slow and steady, don't collapse the sand." The work was exhausting. Sand caved, ropes slipped, and Midnight shuddered at every touch. But the combined strength and determination of two families, once divided by hardship, proved unstoppable. Maria and Ruth comforted the Mustang with soft words and gentle hands. Tomas and Eddie rigged a makeshift harness from rope and blankets. Lucas, face pale but determined, fetched water from a distant tank. Hours passed, the moon arcing overhead as sweat and hope mingled in the cool desert air. Finally, as dawn painted the world in silver, the exhausted rescuers managed to ease Midnight free. The Mustang staggered, foam and dirt clinging to his trembling sides, but he remained upright. Cody pressed his face to the horse's damp neck, tears mixing with sand. Scout barked joyfully, nuzzling the Mustang's leg. Ben turned to Clem, whose blue eyes shone with relief. "Thank you," Ben said quietly, pride and old wounds mingling in his voice. Clem placed a gentle hand on Cody's shoulder. "No thanks needed, you saved him, son." As the sun rose, the group led Midnight slowly toward the Lane farmhouse. Jasper's shadow for the moment was far behind them, but in the distance the Harlan Ranch awaited, and the future, uncertain and stormy, would demand new courage from them all. The first rays of morning swept across the Lane farmhouse as Cody and his father guided Midnight up the rutted lane. The air was sharp, clean after the night's struggle, and the sand that clung to the Mustang's coat glistened gold in the sun. Every muscle in Midnight's body trembled, but he moved forward, driven by instinct and the quiet encouragement of those around him. Cody walked at his side, one hand never leaving the Mustang's damp neck, his cheeks still streaked with the tears of relief and exhaustion. Scout, the blue heeler, darted around the little group, tail raised and barking at every sparrow and shadow. For a moment, even Ruth Lane, her face tight from sleepless worry, couldn't help but smile as she opened the gate. "Bring him in slow, Cody," she called, her voice gentle but strong. "Let's not spook him now." Ben Lane moved to help, steady and silent. He took in the scene. Clem Walker, hollow-eyed but resolute. Maria, her hands dirty but expression full of hope. Tomas, younger but steady, offering a quiet nod. Eddie and Lucas, the two stable hands, hung back, unsure if they belonged, but Ruth beckoned them in. "You boys helped save a life last night. That counts for something." Midnight stopped at the water trough and drank deep. Ben, kneeling to check his legs, whistled low. "He's banged up but tough. Give him some days. He'll pull through." Cody could only nod, words lost in his throat. Maria approached Midnight with a soft brush, working slowly, talking in soothing Spanish under her breath. The Mustang flinched but did not shy away. Inside the kitchen, Ruth set about brewing coffee for the adults and oatmeal for Cody, filling the air with the earthy comfort of home. Clem, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, kept glancing through the window. "Jasper's not going to let this go," he said, voice low. "He'll want his horse back, and there'll be hell to pay when he learns what we did." Ben nodded. "Let him come. The law's on his side, sure, but any man who'd do what he did well, he'll answer for it. We do what's right, not what's easy." The family and their unlikely new allies worked through the morning. Midnight's wounds were tended. Maria and Tomas built a rough corral out of spare lumber and rope. Eddie and Lucas tried to patch the gaps, stealing worried glances at the road. The Lane farm, for so long a place of scarcity and private battles, filled with new purpose. Cody, running water and carrying feed, felt for the first time in months that maybe, just maybe, things could change. But as the sun climbed higher, anxiety crept in. Clem paced the fence line, eyes searching the horizon. At noon, a cloud of dust rose on the southern road, a black pickup, the Harlan Ranch logo stenciled in faded gold on the side, rattling toward the farm. Maria's breath caught. Tomas instinctively reached for a shovel, as if it were a weapon. Jasper Harlan emerged from the truck. In daylight, the lines on his face were deeper, his angular frame even more severe. He wore his usual uniform, pale shirt, jeans, boots, a battered hat pulled low over cold, angry eyes. At his side walked Sheriff Ewell, a tall, heavy-set man in his late 50s with a drooping mustache, rumpled uniform, and a patient, resigned air. Ewell had been sheriff for decades, known for settling disputes with talk instead of violence, but he'd always been wary of Jasper's influence. The sheriff greeted Ben with a polite nod, voice calm. "Morning, Lane. Got a report from Mr. Harlan here about a stolen horse. Mind if we take a look around?" Ben stood firm. "No one's hiding anything, Sheriff. You'll find a horse all right, but you ought to ask how he got to be half buried in the arroyo first." Jasper's jaw flexed. "That horse is my property, Lane. You had no right." Ruth stepped forward, unflinching. "No right to leave a living creature to die either, Mr. Harlan." The confrontation drew everyone in. Clem, trembling but determined, recounted what had happened, Maria and Tomas nodding along, the boys chiming in as witnesses. Cody, his voice small but clear, told how he'd found Midnight. Scout, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, pressed close to Cody's leg. Ewell listened, eyes narrowed beneath his hat. "That's a serious charge, Jasper. We got animal cruelty laws now, same as anywhere." Jasper bristled, but the sheriff raised a hand. "No one's making arrests. Not today. Lane, you keep the horse for now. I'll file a report and talk to the vet. Mr. Harlan, if what I hear is true, you'll have more than pride to worry about." With a final, icy glare, Jasper turned and left, dust trailing behind him. Sheriff Ewell lingered, his tone gentler. "I know times are hard, Ben, but the law's not always as quick as folks need. If Jasper tries anything, you call me. Understand?" "Thank you, Sheriff," Ben said quietly. As the day cooled, the Lane farm settled into an uneasy peace. Midnight, safe in the new pen, grazed with cautious appetite. Cody spent the afternoon at his side, telling stories of wild horses and good endings, as if hope alone could heal wounds deeper than flesh. Scout, ever faithful, lay in the shade nearby, one eye always watching the road. That evening, after a meal shared by everyone, an odd assembly of family, friends, and former strangers, Ben stood on the porch, staring into the blue dusk. Clem joined him, silent at first. "We did right," Ben said, almost to himself. Clem nodded. "You did, but the right thing's never free." From the yard, Ruth's laughter mingled with Maria's soft singing as they fed the chickens, and Cody, dirty, tired, but beaming, raced Scout down the drive, Tomas and the boys cheering him on. For now, the Lane farm was a sanctuary, but the price of defiance would come due soon enough. And somewhere beyond the fields, in a house full of trophies and shadows, Jasper Harlan sat brooding, plotting how to reclaim what he'd lost, and silence those who had dared to challenge his power. The days that followed Midnight's rescue passed in a haze of cautious hope and unspoken worry. The Lane farm, usually so quiet you could hear the wind move through mesquite at noon, now thrummed with the activity of too many hands and hearts. Every morning, Cody was up before the sun, carrying water and feed to the corral where the Mustang grazed, slowly regaining his strength. His father Ben would join him, checking Midnight's leg, sometimes just standing silent, watchful, as if waiting for the other boot to drop. Clem Walker stayed on too, helping Ben and Ruth where he could. He'd taken to sleeping in the barn, always within earshot of Midnight. Some nights Maria and Tomas kept him company, talking in low voices, planning improvements for the corral, or sharing stories from their childhood on ranches far away. For the first time since being driven from their jobs, the two siblings felt they had a place to belong. Maria's kindness worked small wonders on Midnight. With her soft hands and gentle Spanish, she seemed to coax trust from the Mustang bit by bit. Tomas, quiet but determined, grew into his new role, always ready to pitch in, whether mending a fence or helping Ruth haul buckets from the well. Eddie and Lucas, the two young stable hands, came by whenever their chores at neighboring farms allowed. The guilt of what they'd been forced to do lingered in their eyes, but so did a determination to set things right. On the third morning, Cody spotted Eddie lingering by the gate with an old bag of apples. "Thought Midnight might want a treat," he said shyly, and Cody grinned, knowing how hard it was to face past mistakes. For Ruth, the sudden fullness of the house was both a blessing and a trial. She cooked for a crowd each evening, hearty stews and fresh-baked bread, her laughter carrying out the open windows. Yet when she thought no one was looking, she would pause in the doorway and watch Ben with worry creasing her brow. She knew how dangerous it was to stand up to Jasper Harlan, and she feared what price they might yet pay. Scout, the blue heeler, took to guarding the perimeter of the property, barking at every vehicle that passed on the distant road. At night, he curled up beneath Cody's bed, his ears twitching at the faintest noise, a living alarm more reliable than any lock. But as Midnight's wounds healed, the shadow over the Lane farm grew longer. News spread quickly in Willow Creek and beyond. Folks at the feed store, the diner, the church, all whispered about the cruelty at Harlan Ranch and the courage of those who had stood up to it. Some neighbors stopped by to offer quiet words of support or to leave a sack of grain on the porch. Others kept their distance, wary of crossing Jasper. Jasper Harlan, for his part, was far from idle. In his Spartan office, the dust never settled. He worked the phones, calling in favors, meeting with lawyers and other ranchers, his anger now cold and sharp as a branding iron. His bruised pride twisted into vengeance. He'd lost more than a horse, he'd lost control, and in a place like Willow Creek, control was everything. He drove into town, met with the sheriff, threatened lawsuits, even hinted at buying up his neighbors' debts. But not everyone bowed to him. Sheriff Ewell, quietly methodical, continued his investigation. He arranged for the local veterinarian, Dr. Holly Barrett, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with sun-worn skin, short blonde hair, and a gaze as steady as a fence post, to visit the Lane farm and examine Midnight. When Dr. Barrett arrived, her battered green truck clattered down the drive. She was greeted by Cody, who introduced her to Midnight. "He's tough, this one," she murmured as she ran practiced hands along the Mustang's legs and back, her eyes narrowing at the faded bruises and the half-healed wound. "Whoever did this meant for him to die slow." She turned to Ben, her voice low but determined. "I'll file my report with the sheriff. You have nothing to hide, and neither does your boy." Ben thanked her, the relief in his eyes clear, but the visit did not go unnoticed. That afternoon, a sleek sedan rolled slowly past the Lane gate, its tinted windows reflecting the sunlight. Maria saw it from the barn and called Tomas to her side. "Jasper, or one of his men," Tomas said, his voice dark. "He's watching us." The Lane family doubled their precautions, locking doors, keeping Scout close, never letting Cody out of sight after dark. Still, a sense of fear crept in. One evening, Ruth found a dead rattlesnake draped over the porch railing, a warning as clear as any threat. Yet hope was stubborn. Cody, inspired by Midnight's resilience, began keeping a journal about the Mustang's progress, sketches of hooves and proud, wild eyes filling the pages. Eddie and Lucas, growing in confidence, started helping Tomas build a proper paddock from salvaged lumber. Maria coaxed Midnight to accept a halter, then a gentle touch, dreaming aloud of one day seeing him run free across the mesa. And Willow Creek changed too. Rumors of Jasper's actions sparked quiet resistance. Old friends who'd once envied Harlan's power now came together, organizing a petition at the church, talking about fair treatment for animals, for workers, for neighbors who had the courage to do what was right. For the first time in years, Ben Lane felt the stirrings of hope for something bigger than his own family. But the storm was coming. One hot, windless evening, as a blood-red sun dipped behind the mountains, Jasper Harlan drove again to the edge of the Lane property. This time he brought two men with him. Mr. Clay, a lean, sharp-dressed lawyer with pale hair and a vulture's patience, and Chet Wilcox, a hulking ranch foreman known for settling scores with fists instead of words. They approached the house, Jasper's voice raised enough to send Scout barking furiously. Ben stepped onto the porch, Clem and Thomas at his back. Ruth, Maria, and Cody stood just inside the door. The rest gathered in the shadowy kitchen. "You've had your fun," Jasper called, voice echoing in the dusk. "That horse comes back to me tonight, or I'll have the law and the bank here before sunrise." Mr. Clay produced a stack of papers, waving them like a victory flag. "You're trespassing, Lane, harboring stolen property. You'll be liable for damages, and that's if the sheriff doesn't arrest you first." Chet glared, arms crossed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Ben looked Jasper in the eye, his voice steady. "We saved that horse's life. Sheriff knows it, the town knows it, and soon the judge will too." Jasper's face twisted. "You're making a mistake, Lane. Folks like you don't win." But as Jasper and his men turned back to the truck, a line of headlights flickered down the road, neighbors arriving, quietly, steadily, drawn by news and loyalty. Sheriff Ewell's cruiser pulled up behind them, red and blue lights cutting through the night. Dr. Barrett climbed from her truck, vet's bag in hand. The standoff melted in the gathering dark, words replaced by presence. Jasper saw his power waning, felt the ground shift beneath him, but he held on to his anger like a drowning man to driftwood. As he left, his threat still echoed on the night air. Inside, the Lane family gathered in the kitchen, joined by friends old and new. Cody knelt beside Midnight, whispering, "You're safe here. We're not alone." Outside, the storm clouds gathered, but in the circle of lamplight, hope and courage held the night at bay, at least for now. The Lane farmhouse barely slept that night. After the headlights faded and the last of the neighbors drove home, Ruth locked every window and bolted the doors. Clem took to the front porch with a rifle across his lap, settling in beneath the creak of the rocking chair, his shadow looming long in the lamplight. Scout lay beside him, head on his paws, ears twitching at every coyote call. Inside, Ben Lane lay awake beside Ruth, his mind a spinning wheel of worries. He counted each risk debts, drought, Jasper's threats, but found hope too in the memory of neighbors arriving with headlights shining, hands gripping his back, a sheriff's cruiser leading the way. He remembered Cody's arms wrapped around Midnight's neck, the Mustang's heartbeat trembling but alive beneath his son's cheek. Just before dawn, Cody woke with a start. A sliver of light crept through his curtain. For a moment, he forgot the fear and remembered the promise Maria had whispered to him. "Courage is a seed, Cody. You plant it every time you do what's right." He tiptoed to the window and saw Clem still on the porch, nodding to him through the glass. Out in the corral, Midnight shifted in the shadows, head lifted as if he too sensed the morning would bring more than sun. Breakfast was tense. Ruth tried to keep her voice light, filling plates with eggs and potatoes, but the worry in her eyes was unmissable. Maria helped, her quick hands steady but silent. Thomas went out to check the fence lines, Eddie and Lucas trailing behind, eager for the safety of chores. Sheriff Ewell arrived just as the sun broke over the ridge. He parked at the end of the drive, took off his hat, and walked to the porch with measured steps. "Morning, Ben. Got some news." His voice was heavy, lined with the weight of too many years keeping the peace. "Judge is coming up from Santa Fe this afternoon. Jasper's pushing for an injunction. Wants Midnight moved to county impound at least until a hearing." Ruth's breath caught its breath. "They'll take him?" Ewell nodded. "That's the law. But listen, Dr. Barrett filed her report. She's got pictures, wounds, statements from all of you. The judge isn't a fool. If this goes to court, Jasper might find more than he bargained for. I'll be here, and so will half the county if you need them." After the sheriff left, Ben gathered the family and the others in the kitchen. "We knew it had come to this," he said quietly. "They might take Midnight, but that horse is alive because of what we did. They can't take that away." Cody tried not to cry. Maria squeezed his hand. Clem only nodded. "We hold our ground. Truth's on our side. Sometimes that's all a man's got." The rest of the morning was spent making preparations. Tomas and Lucas reinforced the paddock gate, while Maria and Ruth copied every photo and note for the judge. Eddie called his uncle, a rancher with a stubborn streak, who promised to gather more neighbors for the hearing. Word spread in town at the store, the church, the cafe. People remembered the Lane family's kindness through years of hardship. For every neighbor afraid, 2 others quietly joined their cause. By noon, a convoy of trucks and battered sedans rolled down the lane. Among the crowd was Dr. Barrett, boots dusty, hair pulled back, vet bag in hand. "I'll testify," she told Ben, "not just for Midnight, but for every animal that's ever been left behind." The tension broke for a moment when Scout barked, dashing after Cody and the other boys as they carried water to the animals. The children's laughter rose, sharp and sweet, a reminder that hope is stubborn, even in dry ground. Just before 2, the judge's car appeared in a cloud of dust, trailed by Jasper's black pickup and Mr. Clay's sedan. The yard filled with bodies and nerves. Judge Holcomb, a wiry woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a weathered face, stepped out in a gray suit and boots caked with old mud. She looked every inch the frontier's last word. "Let's make this civil," she said. "Sheriff, gather your witnesses. Mr. Harlan, you'll have your say." Jasper, dressed in a crisp white shirt and jeans pressed sharp as knives, strode forward, Mr. Clay at his elbow. "That horse is my property. These people," he gestured at the Lane family and friends, "have broken the law." Dr. Barrett stepped up, voice calm and precise. "That horse is alive because of these people. I examined his wounds myself. You have my report. Neighbors spoke next. Ben, his voice steady as he recounted finding Midnight in the arroyo. Clem, with trembling hands but unwavering words. Maria and Thomas, explaining how they tended the horse back to health. Even Eddie and Lucas, the shame still in their voices, told how Jasper's threats forced their hand. Jasper's eyes blazed with humiliation. It's all lies. They're stealing from me. Judge Holcomb raised a hand. Enough. She turned to Cody. Son, do you have something to add? Cody hesitated, then stepped forward. Midnight never gave up, even when he was scared and hurt. My dad says you judge a man by how he treats what can't fight back. Midnight fought, and so did we. There was a long silence. The judge finally nodded. I'll review the evidence. For now, the horse stays with the Lane family. Mr. Harlan, you're to have no contact until the court makes its decision. If I find your actions were cruel or illegal, you'll answer for them. Jasper stared at the judge, jaw clenched. Mr. Clay whispered in his ear, eyes darting, already calculating his next move. But as the crowd dispersed and friends gathered close, it was clear the Lane family was not alone. That evening, as dusk fell and stars blinked on above the mesa, Ben Lane gathered his family and friends around a fire in the yard. Clem played a quiet tune on an old harmonica, Maria sang a lullaby in Spanish, and Scout curled up at Cody's feet. Midnight, safe in his pen, raised his head to the sky, the firelight glinting in his eyes. There would be more battles to come, more nights when fear crept close. But for now, hope had a place at the table, and the circle of trust, though tested, held strong beneath the endless New Mexico sky. Dawn on the high mesa brought a gentle hush, as if the whole land was holding its breath. The Lane farm was still, the only sounds the faint rustle of cottonwoods and the nicker of horses from the corral. Midnight stood at the fence, his black coat catching the new sunlight, scars visible but healing, a living testament to endurance. Inside, Ruth prepared coffee for the third morning in a row without dread. Ben Lane watched her, seeing the strength behind her smile, and gave thanks for ordinary things, a hot drink, the sound of Cody's laughter, the hope that had crept back into their lives. The kitchen was filled with the warm scent of bread and the softer fragrance of relief. As the family gathered for breakfast, Clem arrived, hat in hand, with the mail and official letter, the court's seal stamped in blue. Ben broke the silence, reading aloud, his voice steady even as his hands trembled. The court finds in favor of the Lane family. Ownership of the horse known as Midnight is hereby transferred. All prior claims are void. For a moment, no one moved. Then Cody sprang from his chair, hugging his father, while Scout barked and wagged with wild joy. Maria wiped away tears she pretended were just from the steam of the kettle. Thomas let out a long sigh. The farmhouse erupted with celebration, Ruth spinning Ben in a laughing dance, Clem banging his battered Stetson on the table, the others clapping, relieved and grateful. Outside, Midnight pranced and snorted as if he, too, understood the meaning of freedom. As word spread, neighbors arrived, bringing pie and fresh-cut flowers, handmade signs declaring, "Welcome home, Midnight." Even Dr. Barrett came by, declaring Midnight sound as a silver dollar, and promising to volunteer her time to help the Lane Ranch become a safe haven for other horses in need. A few days later, Judge Holcomb herself visited, her sharp eyes softened by a rare smile. "The law protects the innocent," she told Cody, "but it takes brave hearts to remind us what's right." She handed Ben a donation envelope from supporters across the county, enough to help the family recover from their recent troubles and begin new repairs on fences, the well, and the barn. Even Jasper Harlan, after a long absence and a very public apology in front of the town council, came to the Lane porch one evening as the sun burned low. His eyes, once hard, now flickered with humility and regret. "I lost sight of what mattered," he said simply, hat in hand. "You cared for what I could not. If you'll allow, I'd like to make it right. My men can help build your new barn." Ben considered, then nodded, offering Jasper his hand. Forgiveness came not as a lightning bolt, but as the slow melt of old snow, making way for green. Midnight's recovery was swift and sure under Cody's watchful care. The boy and horse became inseparable, racing across the fields at dusk, sharing quiet moments beneath the pines, Scout always close by, a blur of blue and white. As the ranch came alive with the promise of a better season, Clem and the others worked to build new corrals and safe enclosures. Thomas began training to become a full-time wrangler, Maria started a journal for the rescued animals, and even Eddie and Lucas volunteered afternoons, learning from Clem's gentle ways. One golden afternoon, the whole valley gathered for a celebration, the first annual Midnight Festival, with food, music, and stories. Children painted their faces and tried to mimic Cody's wild gallop. Adults laughed and reminisced, the air filled with hope and music. Under the wide, forgiving sky, Midnight trotted through the crowd, proud and calm, allowing old and young alike to touch his sleek neck, a living legend reborn. As dusk settled, Ben Lane stood by the fence, watching his son and Midnight silhouetted against a blaze of purple and gold. He thought of the pain, the fear, and the wounds, visible and hidden, that had brought them all here. He understood now that healing did not erase scars, it transformed them into something holy. In the last rays of sunlight, Cody looked up, his face bright with wonder. "He's not just our horse now, is he, Dad?" Ben smiled, laying a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "No, son. Midnight belongs to everyone who ever needed a second chance." Night fell soft and sure over Willow Creek. The farmhouse glowed with light and laughter, music drifting into the endless dark. And in the pasture, under the endless stars, a black Mustang and a boy ran together, fearless at last, knowing that, in a world often shaped by loss, love and courage could still make a new beginning. Sometimes the greatest miracles come not in a flash of lightning, but in moments of quiet courage and forgiveness. Just as Midnight was saved and a broken family found hope again, we are reminded that God's grace can shine through even our darkest hours. No matter how heavy your burdens, no matter how far you have wandered, there is always a way home when we choose compassion, faith, and love. In our daily lives, we each face trials that test our spirit. But with prayer, kindness, and a willing heart, God can turn our struggles into new beginnings. If this story touched you or reminded you of a time when God sent a little miracle your way, please share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to our channel, and tell your friends. May the Lord bless and protect you and your loved ones today and always. If you believe in miracles, type Amen in the comments. Your story matters, and together we can inspire others to never lose faith.